It's a pretty good article today from Gizmodo. Accepting death is not an option. It's a good kind of tie-in between coronavirus and climate change. The worst case scenario with coronavirus is not mass death. It's that people come to accept mass death, to accept that someone will die in the U.S. every 30 seconds as just how it is. Yet that is the proposition being thrust on us now. Yesterday, 2,746 people died of COVID-19 in the U.S., the highest daily death toll recorded since the first confirmed deaths on American in February. That was a weird sentence. That's on the high end of leaked Trump administration forecasts for this time period and shows the 3,000 daily deaths come in June. Come June, and those forecasts might be wishful thinking. This, in a word, is horrific. Excuse me. With the Trump administration and its backers from conservative media to the small but vocal reopen movement are trying to convince people it's not only normal but worth it. Hold on one second, guys. Sorry, I had a weird cough thing come up. That was too much information. But the Trump administration and its backers from conservative media to the small but vocal reopen movement are trying to convince people it's not only normal but worth it. They have turned the idea that we should avoid the bad thing, namely the needless deaths of thousands of Americans, on its head, arguing that we should embrace it full on and just plow forward with reopening the country. It's a monstrous idea in the here and now, but it also sets up a dangerous precedent, priming people to accept policy failure, or worse, reject legitimate policy solutions on what remains the biggest issue facing humanity, climate change. I apologize. Let me tell you that who wrote this was Brian Kahn. Unless we demand more from our leaders and each other, we risk an even bigger catastrophe in our lifetimes. All right. We're getting to some real information here. There is nothing acceptable about 3,000 people dying every day from coronavirus. What's so nauseating about this is that we know what it looks like to contain the virus. We've seen it in action. Countries as diverse as South Korea, New Zealand, and Vietnam have all successfully flattened the curve of death and suffering. The steps they broadly follow are proactive lockdowns and a slow reopening as a curve of infections flattened, followed by contact tracing, mass testing, and ensuring frontline workers have ready access to personal protective equipment. The U.S. could do this. Instead, next to none of it is happening, and the steps that are being taken are half measures at best for a country of this size and geographical scope. At best, we have a patchwork of state-level responses, and few, if any, can be called adequate. As David Wallace Wells writes in New York Magazine, there is still no plan for the end of the coronavirus crisis. Indeed, instead of taking steps to try to wind down the pandemic here, the plan is to use it as a bludgeon in the culture war. Donald Trump has recently and repeatedly described citizens as warriors. No doubt his word choice was influenced by the Call of Duty cosplay going on the steps of the state capitol buildings around the country, a movement to end the life-saving lockdown measures, which Trump has thrown his support behind. The president's rhetoric only further turns coronavirus into a way to divide people, inviting them to take selfish measures under the banner of a nebulous concept of freedom or freedom. In the narrow view of the reopened protesters, freedom means the government plays no role in protecting the greater good. You don't owe your fellow humans anything. That being able to get Chick-fil-A without wearing a mask is an essential expression of liberty and worthy of 3,000 people losing their lives. It also shows some kind of magical thinking that you or a loved one won't be among the 3,000 people that die on a given day next month after succumbing to fluid filling their lungs or heart failure. Yeah, and Crystal Ball actually made a really good observation on the people, demanding that the country reopen, or the guys, the militias with guns on the steps of the state capitals. She was saying that, what if these people use their powers of protest, which are formidable, no doubt. What if they use their powers of protest to protest the way the government is handling taking care of the people in this crisis, or the way the government handled giving away trillions of dollars to big business before they even took care of Americans, or the fact that many Americans haven't been taken care of yet, haven't gotten their checks, haven't gotten unemployment. Americans are lined up for miles awaiting food donations. Why aren't these people out protesting these things happening in the States? No, they just want to go get a haircut, or be free to go hunting or play golf or go to their second homes or whatever it is. In some ways, it's the logical extension of the conservative movement, which has put individualism and corporations over the public good, indeed. And this movement is well-funded by right-wing think tanks. This is my own observations here. Right-wing think tanks, fossil fuel companies, corporations at large. They fund this entire conservative movement, and Fox News, and all the Rush Limbaughs of the world, convincing you that stupid is the way to live. A reopened protester will argue that the government should get out of the way and allow anyone who wants to go back to work or to a store or to a beach to do just that. Anyone who's afraid of getting COVID-19 is welcome to stay home. That reasoning, however, will lead to greater rates of infection, according to health experts, which puts everyone at increased risk regardless of how they feel about lockdown order. And all of this has been created by a well-oiled and well-moneyed apparatus to get people to think this way. That libertarianism is a good thing, that, government can only be evil. And they can be evil. Don't get me wrong. They can be very, very evil. They can be up to incredibly crazy shit. But the thing is that, nobody talks about oversight, or nobody talks about citizen oversight, which is, should be impressed upon people as being extremely important. At the same time as the economy craters because people cannot work without risking death, there's been precious little support for workers compared to other developed countries, something that, again, the federal government could address if it wanted to. That's led to anger that has, in part, spilled over and fueled the culture war on the ground, which is largely aimed at governors trying to protect the public's health. The idea that there is an individualist solution to the pandemic is laughable. Yet that is both what the Trump administration and rank-and-file conservatives have set their sights on. That's why the movement to reopen plays down the death toll and plays up the perceived injustice of taking actions to not spread a deadly virus. In essence, it's a rejection of society itself and science. Sometimes when people feel vulnerable or angry, their aggression can take the form of wanting others to suffer, like a sense of revenge or retaliation against perceived injustice. Wendy Greenspun, a clinical psychologist practicing in New York who has focused on the climate crisis in recent years, tells Earther, "This is the darker side of our humanity and not easy to look at. Sometimes that kind of aggressive wish is bolstered by others who band together uniting against a perceived enemy. It's depressing in any light, but especially as a climate person. For decades, climate action has been held hostage by a small minority of liars and Republican politicians to profit a few fabulously wealthy companies. That is true. Today, more than 3/4 of Americans are worried about climate change and want action. Majorities support a variety of policies under the Green New Deal and a green stimulus, including conservatives. Obviously, there's issues there. Yet the federal government has shown no appetite to actually do that, remaining captured by fossil fuel interests, the status quo, and fear of the AstroTurf opposition. There's been this nagging feeling I've had since the start of the lockdown protests, and the zero empathy shown by Trump. It's tempered my optimism that now is a time to build something new. While it's still very much possible to use this moment to build a better, just future, it's clear that there is a group of people who will violently fight tooth and nail against that, even if it means people die unnecessarily, and some leaders are willing to cave and risk the greater good. The Reopen movement provides a political cover for political politicians, to ignore the science and popular will to enact short-sighted policies and throw up their hands when more people get sick and die. It also gives us a preview of how some people and leaders will respond to the steps necessary to address climate change, which will require similar bold actions that will upend the status quo. The best available science tells us drawing down emissions rapidly this decade is our best shot at protecting the climate and humanity. Even then, people will still die, and we should absolutely mourn that fact. But more than that, we should be mad as hell that fossil fuel companies and pliant politicians have made that the best case scenario while also doing their damnedest to ensure we don't even get that. The idea that we can reopen the U.S. in the face of the coronavirus risks is as hollow as thinking we can do nothing about carbon emissions. Both will end in the same place. Needless death in the service of selfishness. In the case of the climate crisis, that death will also be so much more widespread, encompassing the entire biosphere that has allowed humanity to thrive. So, climate change equals lots and lots more death than the coronavirus would ever bring us. I'm not saying it's not dangerous, just saying. Look, I get it. The coronavirus pandemic is a fucking nightmare, and so are the consequences of lockdowns. With no vaccine on the immediate horizon, a cratering economy, and a rudderless government haphazardly doling out paltry relief funds, these are terrifying times. The climate crisis is similarly terrifying by requiring us to think completely differently about the way the world is constructed and build something new, something that doesn't exist yet. Anyone that tells you we don't have a choice in solving either problem, that we must simply accept our lot as foot soldiers in the service of the economy, and that division is the only way forward, is lying. We do have a choice, and a mass death is not acceptable or inevitable, but more than anything, the only way through both of these crises is banding together and finding what Greenspun called the sweet spot between fueling the urgency and then not being so overwhelmed and hopeless that you give up. Okay, I just want to read that. Interesting article. I didn't agree with necessarily everything in there. Some things were a little bit cartoonishly drawn on some level, but I have some thoughts as well on the Reopen movement. In case anybody wants to check it out, Michael Moore has a new video out. I guess it was a podcast from yesterday or the day before, something about we are in a climate of urgency. So Michael Moore has gone full doomer, along the lines of Guy McPherson, Jem Bendell, Roger Hallam, et cetera, and all the folks who accept reality. So, doomer equals realist. In the sense that that's where we're going, is utter and complete doom if we don't do something wildly different. I was rewatching Planet of the Humans today, and it's funny, all the critiques of the movie really only have to do with green energy, mostly. They don't actually talk about the message. A lot of the messages in the movie that were spot on, which is, how humans view themselves in the world, how our system is creating all the destruction and the damage, how the green energy movement is kind of all about promoting the same system that we have and prolonging the system that we have and allowing people to continue living the way they live. You know, the movie is questioning how humans actually organize themselves and how we think about ourselves and how we live the way we live, and that's that's actually pretty spot on. And I can't, you know, the more critiques or the more bashing of the movie I see, the more I realize Mike Morris and Jeff Gibbs and this movie are more over the target than people would like to admit, and that's why they're so upset about it. And anyways, yes, having him on the Doomer team rocks. And anyways, go check out that video that he put out. It's spot on. Again, he goes down to the basic premise of we have this environmental movement, we have this green energy movement, we have renewables, and people pushing for Green New Deals and all this stuff, and nothing has basically changed for the better. It has only gotten worse, and the extinction rates in animals are incredibly high. Humans aren't there yet. But would we be concerned if our extinction rate was, 60% or 90%, as it is with vertebrates and insects? Just because we want to not pay attention to the extinction rates of other animals and other species on the planet doesn't mean that our turn isn't next. Everything's fine. Don't make waves. Don't be angry. Don't be hyperbolic or factual. Don't scare the children. Don't make people afraid. Everyone must be happy, must remain happy and positive. And we can't have radical change because it's too much to ask. We can't pay for it. We can't possibly do the things required to save the planet because that would cost jobs. That would mean we'd have to change everything. That might mean we can't have our vacation that we worked for. That might mean that it's not all about money, that the thing I've been told was important my whole life is the problem. My job is the problem. My lifestyle is the problem. My hopes and dreams are the problem because maybe they weren't my hopes and dreams to begin with. They were just something I was told to hope for since I was very young. By the constant barrage of movies and TV shows and commercials showing me how nice you could live if you had money, fame, and power. The country is starting to reopen. I can feel the collective sigh of relief even as people are sounding the alarms about coronavirus not being done with us yet. Even in myself, no one likes to be told what to do, to be forced to sit by yourself on your hands, to not go out and feel the sun on your face or talk to a friend. I can also hear the earth sigh. Here we go again. She says, oh, happy days. Humans are back to normal. Normal being the constant grinding and expansion of humans into every corner of the planet. Hungry, ravenous, insatiable, stupid little humans. In the middle of this forced sitting on our hands, someone forced us to watch a movie about how stupid little humans are placating themselves with dreams of endless green growth. Michael Moore has gone full doomer, code word for realist, all the vehement, angry voices, including George Monbiot. Denouncing Moore's film can counter the fact that the humans are killing, can't counter the fact that the humans are killing the planet at a greater speed every year. That fact is irrefutable. Yes, it's lovely that renewable energy has gotten better and more efficient in the last 10 years, but has that lowered emissions worldwide? Has that lowered emissions enough to get us on track for carbon neutrality in the next 10 years? The answer is not even close. The worst part of the green energy push is that it does the same thing a nice talking Democrat does for the people. It puts them to sleep. It makes them think that everything is fine because someone who cares is in charge. If we just have someone in charge who can convert us all to green energy, we can go back to our expansive, consumptive lifestyles, the lifestyle everyone is clamoring to get back to after all this coronavirus mess is over. Indeed, the forces of misinformation are in charge. The president of misinformation is president. Even though the science is telling us we need to take care of ourselves, hey guys, get back to work because we already gave away trillions to big business, but we don't have anything left for you to weather this storm. And the crowd cheers. Misinformation is the rule rather than the exception. And the voices of caution can be confused in their own self-satisfaction. Hey guys, Shouldn't we worry about this climate change thing? Hey guys, if you tell the truth about climate change, won't that scare people from taking action? Which one is it, George Monbiot? Which one is it? You are part of the XR movement, aren't you? Are renewables going to keep the airline industry going to keep heavy manufacturing going to keep our war machines going to reverse the climb of CO2 in the atmosphere, going to reverse the decline in insects, going to put fish back in the ocean? I will say, attacking green energy is something one could debate. Attacking our consumptive lifestyles and our freedom to consume everything we're told we could have might be a great subject of Moore's next film. Might be a good subject to contemplate as we reopen the economy. You know, the thing that's killing the planet. Happy hunting. Hey guys, remember to like, share, and subscribe. You can also support the channel at the links below: PayPal, Square, Patreon. Thank you so much.